Everything that you can see right now, everything in this room, and everything you've seen since you woke up this morning started its life in the same way. In a boardroom with a small group of people sitting around asking themselves one simple question: who are we making this thing for? And the answer has always been about demographics, because we make everything in this world for people based on their age, their income, their gender, their marital status, the number of kids they have, their education. And that's the fundamental problem. There was a time when demographics were destiny, but those days are over now. We've moved past that. Today, thanks to the flattening forces of technology, we can all largely live however we like. Nobody really acts their age anymore. Gender doesn't entirely dictate how we behave. You can't pick a rich guy out on the street, and education isn't just for a handful of the privileged few. It's clear that we need a better way to understand each other in a post-demographic world, so we've gone and collected enough accurate data to earn a PhD several times over. 500,000 surveys now from 180 countries, 152 languages around the world that all tell us one simple thing: who are these folks out there, and what do they actually care about? What do they value? Because what we value determines what we do. Now, with this data, we can more powerfully predict and influence behavior than we've ever been able to before, which means we can build better products and services and brands and institutions and ideas. And along the way, what I'm most excited about is that we can build a better world too. Because it turns out that in order to change the world, the very first step is to just change the way we look at the world. And I'd like to start by talking to you about Bob and Sally. I had a marketing company that worked specifically in real estate development for about 10 years. We worked on shopping malls, we worked on office complexes, mixed-use developments, master planned communities, condo towers. And there was always a meeting at the beginning of every project where we sat in a boardroom with a small group of people and we talked about who are we building this thing for. And Bob and Sally are my code name for every target audience that we ever described. Someone in that room had generally gone to the trouble of writing up a little story about someone named Bob and Sally, or whatever their names happened to be, and that they were, I don't know, let's say almost on the verge of retirement and living in the suburbs and thinking about downsizing to a single-family home and moving into a multi-story building in a dense urban environment and changing their life, and their kids had left the nest, and they were driving a minivan, and they liked this brand and that brand and this brand. We had all of this information about who these people were, most of it made up, most of it just from intuition and gut. And then we would go out and spend millions of dollars trying to attract them to the project and sell them or lease them or rent them some space, whatever the end transaction in that particular situation might have been. And then 2 years would go by, 3 years would go by, and we'd go to the ribbon cutting, and I'd look around the room, and there wasn't a single Bob or Sally there. We'd just spent $3 million talking to a whole bunch of people who didn't show up. Now, the place had sold out. It had leased up. It had rented out. So it was a success, but not for the people that we thought. It turns out, and we have data to support this now, that roughly 90% of that money was wasted. 90% of it just went off into the ether. We were using 10% of those budgets to actually talk to the people who cared enough to come and actually participate in whatever the transaction we were trying to promote happened to be. Now imagine if you took that 90%, you were able to do something else with it. If you were able to take that 90% and actually talk to the people who you knew were going to come. Or you took that 90% and you used it to make the product more impactful and better for the people who you knew were going to be there, instead of spending it just throwing it out there and hoping that some of it stuck. This is the problem. We always start with this sequence of numbers, and I don't think I even need to read these out loud for us all to know what they are. 18 to 24, 25 to 36, 37 to 45. They're so ingrained in our minds ever since we went to school that these are the correct age categories, and the first job we have to do when we start something is to figure out which one of these categories our audience falls into. And then we start making stuff up about them. It's kind of a hard thing to believe when you think about the logic involved here, that somehow when you go to bed on the evening before your 46th birthday, and then you wake up in the morning and you're 46, you're somehow a different person than when you went to bed the night before. You're in a whole new category, and we need to treat you and talk to you in a different way than we did yesterday, because you've been once more around the sun on this rock that we live on. It doesn't make any sense. And to do that to entire generations of people, there's an interesting fact on Wikipedia. You share your birthday with roughly 18 million people on this planet. Now, what leap of logic would make us think that we have anything in common with any of those folks? But somehow, those ideas, and not just about age, but about income and gender and marital status and number of children, they've permeated every business practice to the point where we're paralyzed until we think we have an understanding of our audience based on these descriptive categories, these labels that we put onto people. In fact, though, if we look around the world and see how often people agree with each other who fit into some of these categories, it's quite a shocking number. So we have, again, 500,000 surveys now around the world, 180 different countries. We're statistically accurate for the globe. And if we just isolate, for example, people who fit into the baby boomer age category and test them against all 420 different things that we've measured, all 420 metrics in our data set about what people value, what they care about, what's important to them. Baby boomers agree with each other a whopping 14% of the time. So if you're going to target baby boomers with a real estate development, with a shopping center, with a commercial enterprise of any sort, you have at best a 14% chance that you're going to get them. Generation X agrees with each other 15% of the time, and millennials, who we can't seem to hear enough about how different they are, how special they are, how millennials need us to change our HR practices and our marketing and our products and services and brands because they're some sort of a unicorn in the enchanted forest that we've never met before. Millennials only agree with each other 13% of the time. That means 87% of the time, millennials disagree with each other about everything. How can you target a millennial when they disagree on everything 87% of the time? It kind of begs credulity when you think about it from that perspective. Now, the other point I'd like to make is that all of us in this room, all of us in the world, we agree with each other about 8% of the time just because we're alive and we're breathing. So you have to subtract 8% from these numbers, and that shows you how much more effective you're actually being by targeting a demographic category. Your ROI is roughly 7, 8, 9% at best. That's not a very good number. I'm going to tell you a quick little story called Three Friends in an Alley at Midnight, because this is the solution to demographic stereotypes. It all starts with this story. Three friends are out having a good time one evening. They're out a little bit late. They may have had a drink or two, and they've decided it's time to leave. They're walking down the street. They're being loud, they're punching each other on the shoulder, they're having a good time, they haven't seen each other for a while, they're very happy to be together. They turn a corner and suddenly there's a dark alley. They have to make a decision. What are we going to do? Friend number one, the only thing we know is that friend number one has as a primary value adventure. Of course, friend number one thinks it's the best idea in the world to go down this alley late at night, dark, after we've been out having a couple of drinks with my friends who I haven't seen for a long time. How could there be a better way to end the evening? Friend number two, the only thing we know for sure is that friend number two has a primary value of safety. Going down this dark alley in the middle of the night after we've been out having a good time with my friends who I love dearly is not the last thing I want to do is go down that dark alley. Who knows what might happen when we go down? Let's go back to the bar where the lights are bright and we can call the police if we need to. Friend number three, the only thing we know for sure is that their primary value is friendship, doesn't care whether we go down the alley or go back to the bar as long as we do it together, because staying together and being friends is really what matters. Now, isn't it interesting that all three of those responses to that particular situation seem perfectly logical? I could argue any one of those, and not one of those people had to stop and say to themselves, am I male, female? Am I rich? Am I poor? Do I have an MBA? Did I go to school? Do I have kids? What's my education? None of that matters. The only thing that matters is what they value. If you know what someone values, you know how they're going to behave. Now, if we could do that for an entire target audience, what a powerful tool that would be. It's because of this one sentence. If you only think about one thing today when I'm finished, take this one sentence. What we value determines what we do. Our age does not determine what we do. Our income does not determine what we do. Our religion does not determine what we do. What we value determines what we do. So we have 500,000 surveys. We've measured 420 different things in 152 languages in 180 countries. By the way, that's a map of the internet that I threw up there. I think it's very fascinating to think that that sort of network of neurons firing is really the way we run our world today. It's not just that this data is enormous, it's also that this data is arranged in a very, very particular way. If you're a statistician or a stats geek or you're trying to be cool with some stats friends, you can tell them that this database that you've heard about today is arranged in what the statisticians refer to as a random stratified statistically representative sample, which is kind of fun to say after you practice it a couple of times. It's a bit of a tongue twister the first time you say it. Really all it means, though, is that all the data is exactly proportionate to the real world. So we have the same number proportionately of men, women, rich, poor, south, north, east, west, all the ways that you can look at the real world. We have an exact miniature replica. So it means that the data that comes out of it is incredibly accurate. It's plus or minus 3.5% accurate, and we're 95% sure that it's only plus or minus 3.5% accurate. This is about 6 times more data and 6 times more rigorous than you need from a PhD from Harvard or any other university you care to mention. So let me tell you a little bit about what it does. Right now, we still have demographics as a tool to understand our audiences, and it works fine. Demographics is a great way for us to know that we're not talking to 18 to 24-year-old men who work in a grocery store when we're trying to sell them a $3 million penthouse. We still need to have some sense of the demographics because it helps us understand a little bit about who we're talking to, but not about how they behave and what they like, and what will motivate them, and what triggers we need to pull in order to get them to change their behavior. Psychographics are another thing that people are very, very excited about. Psychographics include information about how you've behaved in a particular product category up until now. So my friend here who's staring at me intently in the front row, I'm going to take a wild guess and say you drink about 3 cups of coffee a day. That's a psychographic fact about you, not a demographic fact. But it doesn't tell me if I can get you to drink 6 cups, switch brands, get you on tea, get you off caffeine altogether, and get you on Red Bull every morning instead of coffee and a hot beverage at all. I don't know any of those things based on your demographics and psychographics. In order to know those things, I need to understand what your values are, and that's your Valuegraphics. Now, here's that slide again, how much we agree with each other in these age categories, which, by the way, the same kind of numbers apply to gender, marital status, education, income, number of kids, all of those things. I just use age because it's an easy one for us all to identify with. So here's how much we agree with each other based on age categories around the world, based on all that data, plus or minus 3.5%. Here's how much we agree with each other if we start using values to understand and segment our audiences. That's about 8 or 9 times better. So that means that every dollar you spend trying to influence a target audience, instead of it only being worth instead of you only having a chance of getting 7, 8, 9% interaction and engagement with this audience, you now have 82, 81, 87%. You're getting a much, much higher ROI for every dollar and every hour that you spend trying to talk to a target audience. Now, there's nothing that you've had to buy. All I'm asking that you do is consider how you look at the world. Instead of thinking that demographics are somehow an indicator of behavior, realize they're not, that instead what matters is what people value, how they think about the world. That's how they make their decisions, whether they're going to go down that dark alley at night. That's really a decision about which shopping mall they're going to go to, which store they're going to patronize, how many pairs of shoes they're going to own, and how they're going to make decisions to get to that end result. It's about 8 times more agreement, 8 times more influence, if you will, that you can have over your target audience by simply shifting the way you think about them. Now, I've gone and done a specific report today. I only get to skim over the top of this. There's more information to be had if anyone's interested. But I'm going to tell you a little bit what I've discovered about Middle East mall patrons. So what we've done is gone and built what I call the Valuegraphics report on Middle East mall patrons. These are the highlights. And I want you to know that notes are optional. When I'm finished today, I'm going to give you a place you can go online, enter a password, and every slide I've just shown you and all the ones I'm about to show you, you can take them and use them however you'd like to use them. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you a little story about what we know about Middle East mall patrons. The way we do this is we start with what we call an unlocking survey. So we found 1,850 people in the region who said to us that they are either currently patrons of a particular mall or they have been to a mall. So these are mall-favorable people. These are folks who understand what a shopping center is all about. Some of them, not so favorable. Some of them, we call them non-visitors. They really only go if they absolutely have to. Others, very, very excited about going to the mall. So we've looked at both groups, and we're comparing what their values are, how they decide whether or not they're going to go down that back lane. And this is what we've learned. The visitor profiles fall into these three categories, what I call necessitists, experiential loyalists, pure loyalists. What's interesting to know about these three groups, I'm going to tell you a couple quick things about them. It breaks up as 31%, 24%, and 20%. It's not that big of a difference. Now, there's a few splinter groups in there. That's 25%. Those are people who, they only 1% of the population, 2% of the population. It's too small to worry about. We've got three big, ripe pieces of low-hanging fruit on this tree that we can grab, that we can make a difference by understanding what their values are and how to get them to come down the back lane, what we need to say. So let's take a look. The necessitists. Here's a few quick things we know about them. This is 31% of the people who are loyal to a mall, people who are very excited about shopping. These are visitors. They want things to be fast and convenient. When we ask them, what one thing would you do to your shopping center to make it better? They said, I want it smaller, because that's faster and convenient. So we're not going to all go and take part of our mall out, but what can we do to make it feel like it's faster and convenient, make it feel like it's smaller for this 30% of the folks who are coming or looking for this? They want it to be a quick thing. They come a couple times a month. They don't have any debt. They don't believe in accruing debt, no matter how badly they want something. They're very sentimental about memories. They have things that have happened to them that relate to shopping and relate to shopping centers, and they're quite sentimental about those things, and they consider themselves to be very spiritual. The next group, the reward loyalists. This is 24% of the market. Now, they're loyal for a very interesting reason. We find loyalty appears with different things attached to it. People will be loyal because of just a belief that it's what people do. We are loyal. That's what we should do as humans. Other people are loyal because they believe people deserve their loyalty. So this group is loyal because they've had some past experience that has engendered that loyalty. Knocking them out of that pathway will be quite difficult. They're very loyal to this memory of something wonderful that happened to them at this particular mall that they like going to. So we have to create more memories for them if we're going to try and steal share from one mall and get it over to get them shopping at somewhere else. It isn't just about the transaction. It's about the memories that we create while that transaction happens. These folks are very organized planners. They only come to the mall about once a month. They're not browsers. They don't really care about the windows. They don't really care about just hanging around in the food court. They're not there to have a good time. They're loyal, and this is where they go because this is where they go. Something good has happened here for me here before, and I expect it will continue happening. The pure loyalists, the third group that we'll talk about, they're loyal because loyalty. That's just what humans do. They have a thing, one of their core values, that doesn't show up very often when we talk about commercial enterprises, is meeting basic needs. Now, those of you who are familiar with Maslow's needs hierarchy, you can see a direct overlink here. This is the bottom layer of Maslow's needs hierarchy. These people are concerned about getting food on the table, getting the kids out the door, making sure everybody's got clean clothes on, and that their day is going the way it is meant to be. That's their primary concern as they go through their day. So if you're going to help them, you need to be aware that that's what's going on in their mind. That's what they're deciding whether or not they're going to go down that back lane, how they're going to make a decision about whether they patronize your establishment or someone else's. They are window shoppers. I think there's a direct correlation here between being a window shopper and worrying about your basic needs. It's kind of like going to a bakery and just smelling it. It doesn't cost anything. I've had a good time, and I feel like I've had some sort of bakery in my life, but I haven't had to spend anything. So window shopping is a way to perhaps feel like I'm shopping. I'm part of an experience. I'm building something here. This is interesting. I could spend time with my family and my friends, but I don't have to actually spend any money. Now, we only visit these folks when they need to. They consider themselves to be light workaholics. That's, I don't take a reported number of hours per week very seriously, but these folks do say to us that they work a lot. So that has to be taken into account when you're thinking about who they are as well. Now, quickly, let's compare to the people who don't come to malls, because I think there's some opportunities to change their mind. Here's what we know about them. And then I'm going to wrap this all up into a nice little package and tell you those few values that you need to be focused on to get more people to come to your mall more often. First off, the non-visitors, we have better optionists, we have what I call the elsewhere loyalists, and we have the haters. Of course, again, there's those splinter groups, those few percentage points here and there that we really don't need to worry about because those first three groups are 32%, 29%, and 21% of your market of people who don't come to malls that I think we might have a chance, except this group. The better optionists. So 30% of the people, 32% of the people who don't come to malls right now, just like, why would I need to go to a mall? They just don't see a need whatsoever. I think they're going to be a very hard group to influence. We probably don't need to be spending a whole lot of time talking about them. The elsewhere loyalists, however, I think are very interesting, and anyone who's in leasing or thinking about what the merchandise mix is within a particular shopping center should take note of these folks. They're very loyal to small family-run stores and markets, not loyal to big brands, not loyal to chains. They're loyal to anything that gives them a sense of dealing with an individual, with one person, with a human. They're looking for human connection and interaction. They will go to a mall occasionally. They bond and follow individuals. So within a particular store, they're coming into that store because the woman who always looks after them in that store, her name is Nancy, and I can't come here without Nancy being here because that's who I'm loyal to. I'm not loyal to the store. If Nancy leaves and goes to another store, I'm probably going to go and see Nancy at her new store instead of staying loyal to this particular store. All good information to know about this group, and I'll get back in a moment why I think this group is is a group that we can influence. And then there's the haters, who I also think we are able to influence. They hate mass-produced experiences in chain stores in general. They're not interested in spending their time in something that feels like it's manufactured. They want things to be authentic. They want things to be real. They want to be at the souk. They don't want to be at the mall. They might come once a year if they absolutely have to, because there's nowhere else to get the particular thing that they're looking for. They're very, very social. This is key. And they're self-educators. They're willing to learn, which means they're willing to change their mind. So this group, we have hope that we can do things with this group. Now let's talk about, for all 6 of those audiences, the 3 who already come to malls and the 3 who don't, what are the values that trigger their decisions? We've just given you so far a little bit of demographic information, a little bit of psychographic information. Again, our report around this group is much deeper. I'm just skimming over the top here. If we take all of their values and mash them together, and we only focus on the ones that show up at least twice, we have 6 different groups. Each group will have 3 or 4 values that are unique to them. We've compared them all and said which values come up at least twice across the whole board. Now, there's other ways you could approach that information. You could say, I'm not interested in trying to convert the folks who aren't coming now. I'm only interested in getting more per visit out of the folks who already come. That's fine. That would be a different approach. For today's conversation, what I've done is said, let's pretend we're just going to try and increase traffic from everybody, regardless of whether they're currently coming or not. We put all their values together in a basket. Here's the ones that show up over and over again. There's always a togetherness value. Everywhere in the world, every industry that we work with, there's always a togetherness value, and I think that's quite hopeful, frankly. The most important value for any of us, regardless of what we're talking about, is some form of wanting to be part of something larger than ourselves. It comes out in flavors like family, relationships, community, friendships, all different things like this, and for this audience, it's all about family. Family is the way they get their sense of togetherness. Okay, let's just stop there for 2 seconds. If you're going to take that and turn that into a tactic, turn that into a strategy, your enterprise needs to be, more than any of these other values that we'll talk about in a moment, your enterprise needs to be focused on how do I make this feel like your family is going to be better off because you are here than if you weren't. Family is everything to this particular segment that we're talking about. Morality. I want to dwell on morality for a second. I'm pleased to tell you that this is the first time in all the work we've done around the world, morality never shows up. And in fact, here in the UAE, when we started to dig into the data set, we see morality very, very close to the top. The only other place in the world where morality has anything to do with how people make their decisions about how they live their lives and whether they're going to go down that dark alley or not is in Africa. It doesn't even exist in the United States. Canada, it's very low down the list where I'm from. Morality is an enormously important value here. We have family, we have morality. We move to loyalty and personal responsibility. If you can find a way to build your offering, program your shops, think about your marketing, the experience that people will have, all you need to do is trigger those values, and they'll decide to come down the alley that represents deciding to come and patronize your establishment. Nothing else matters. For this audience, you don't need to be thinking about price. You don't need to be thinking about environmentalism. You can if you would like to. It's not going to hurt. But these are the only things that they really care about, that they use to make decisions. It's like the world's biggest grocery store. Up until now, we've been wandering around in that grocery store saying, what do we think people are going to want? Well, cinnamon. Everybody likes cinnamon. Let's try that. And the guy over there, his enterprise, he uses bananas, so we'll get some bananas. And we put a few things in our grocery cart, and we go home, we try and make a meal, and we hope somebody's going to come and enjoy that meal. What we've done with Valuegraphics is we've gone and done the grocery shopping for you. And we've said, these are the 4 ingredients you need to worry about. If it's not in the grocery bag that I've just presented, it's not important. It doesn't show up as statistically valid in the data. So anything that's not about those few things that are in the grocery bag, they're unimportant. They're fine if you want to, but they're not going to move the needle for you in any way whatsoever. So the big question is, what's for dinner? I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples. This is an example from the banking industry. I call it the Jason Bourne bankers. This is a micro case study. I hate the word case study because as soon as you say the word case study on a stage as a speaker, everybody's eyes close. So this is a micro case study. I'm only going to tell you these 2 values, status and relationship, came out for this particular sector of the economy, which is people who still go to a bank. Now, this is North American data, but I think it holds true just as a case study, an example of how this stuff works. We found out from our methodology that status and relationships are the 2 most important things for this particular audience. When they go to the bank, they want to feel like Jason Bourne. They want to have a retinal scan and a fingerprint, and they want to have tellers behind bars, and they want columns, and they want a black and white checkered floor. They want it to feel important, even if they're just going to pay their hydro bill. They want to feel like this is an important moment. They want to get up, they're out with their friends after work. They want to stand up and say, listen, I got to go. I have to do my banking. And their friends will say, wow, they're going to think this to themselves. That sounds important. There must be masses of money moving from one account to another, somewhere on a Swiss bank or an island or something like this. Now, in North America, I'm not sure what the banks are like here, but there's one particular bank in North America called Capital One Savings. And they've just spent Lord knows how many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, converting all of their physical banks into coffee shops. So you go into the bank, and your banker will be making you a cafe au lait or an espresso while he's talking to you about your retirement savings plans and bringing you a cookie. For the Jason Bourne bankers, there couldn't be anything worse. These folks in that boardroom, I know what the conversation was. They were sitting around the board of directors and they said to each other, we want millennials to come to our bank. Well, what do millennials like? Coffee. So let's be a coffee shop. So $100 million later, they've all got coffee shops, and nobody who fits into this category, these particular bankers, the Jason Bourne bankers, they're not going to go. It's an opportunity, though. There isn't a single bank chain that I'm aware of in North America or any of the other places in the world where we've worked that are trying to be exclusive, upscale, important, that are filled with status and makes me understand that I have a relationship with this particular brand. I think it's a wide open opportunity to bring back some of those old-fashioned ways that we think about banks back in the day. So what can we make? What are the buttons we need to push to make things happen in shopping centers? So here's your grocery list. Here's the only things that matter in that bag: morality, loyalty, personal responsibility. And when non-visitors meeting basic needs came up more often than it did for visitors, and then that togetherness value of family. There's really only 2 big questions that come out of this that you need to take back and talk about with your teams internally. I would suggest you start a brainstorming conversation internally with these 2 questions. How can we take and amplify the values that we know are important for our visitors? How can we turn up the volume? We don't need to be turning up the volume on anything unless it's in that grocery bag. But how can we, for the things that are in that grocery bag, make things louder, make things more obvious? And secondly, how can we expand what a mall is so that we can include the things that non-visitors are looking for. They want to be loyal to small family-run shops. Why don't we have some small family-run shops in our shopping center? Give them an opportunity to have the best of both worlds. I think we'd be able to win some converts from the non-user category quite simply. I'm going to wrap up with a couple of quick slides here that are just about what we're trying to accomplish in the world. I believe that a future that's built on the values that we all share as human beings will be a much better future than the one we have where we're all building everything based on demographic stereotypes that we now know statistically don't hold true. So they're not working for us, and they're divisive. So really, it's time for us to get past demographic stereotypes and move into a world where we're using information about what people actually care about, how they make their decisions. And if we do that, if we're successful at that, maybe this will be the new beginning. Everything in this room, everything you can see right now, and everything you've seen since you woke up this morning began its life in the same way, in a boardroom with a small group of people sitting around asking themselves one simple question: who are we making this thing for? And the answer is always about what they care about, what they value, what they think is most important in their life and in their day, and for the people that they love. I, for one, think that this will be a much better world than the one we have right now. So, to change the world, we must simply change the way we look at the world. If you'd like all my slides, go to valuegraphics.com. On the client login page, you need to put in a password. The password is MECS+R for obvious reasons. It'll be up there for a couple of days. You can download the PDF file. You can also find a way to contact me on that site if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. And I'm very, very active on LinkedIn, less so on some of the other channels, but please feel free to join me and have this conversation online wherever you like. And lastly, my book is available on Amazon.com if you'd like to buy a copy and learn a little bit more. Thank you for inviting me to be here.